We're just a few weeks away from the primaries for Peoria City Council's at-large seats, and that vote that is going on. And joining me now is candidate Janice Lindsay. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
This is your first time, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken, running for city government, obviously for city council.
Correct.
What brought you into the ring to run for an elected office?
Well, I've lived in Peoria majority of my life, and I remember Peoria when we first moved here when I was a little girl, and there was a great town. You could leave your back doors open, not lock your doors. Neighbors knew each other. Neighbors took care of each other's children. They looked out for families, and we don't have that today, and that concerns me because I want to retire in Peoria and stay. I also have grandchildren here, and I want my children that are far off to be able to say Peoria is home. It's a safe place to live as well as prosperous.
You talk about safety. Last year was a very deadly year.
Yes.
I know crime is much beyond just homicides, but it was a deadly year, and so far this year already, there have been 5 homicides within our city. What would you do to address the crime in the city of Peoria? What would you suggest to be done?
First of all, we need to promote unity. Unity is a very, very solid rock for the city of any community. Our neighborhood associations, I would suggest, become more involved. Get them acclimated to being more visible and to join forces with other communities. Start using the electronic devices, which is a terrible thing to have to do, but with the crime that we've got going on, the homicides, to find bodies in backyards, these are things that really need to be addressed and quickly. But I really do look at uniting the neighborhood associations to come together and to empower them on what we can do as a united front.
What about police? What kind of role do they have in your mind? Is there anything that police can do more? Or there's been a lot of conversation about community trust. We know that police depend a lot on the community to tell them what's going on, to tell them who's doing what. And there are those who argue that that trust in certain aspects and parts of the community isn't there right now. Do you agree with that? And if so, what can be done there on the police side and the community side to build that trust, to get that trust to where it needs to be?
I'm glad you asked that question. I feel that our police officers, over the years, I'm sure they've built up a fear. And that's normal for what's going on in the communities when you're dealing with gangs, drugs, and all these other evils that have moved in. I just feel that they should be more visible. As far as, I know there's Proctor Center, there's the Boys and Girls Club, there's Carver Center, they have bikes during the summer. They need to be more connected to their community. The libraries, show up and just be there where the young people can talk to them. Stop at the schools and visit, and especially the neighborhood police. They need to be more introducing of themselves, because if I approach you and I'm just an officer, the first thing I'm going to do is throw up. I'm afraid. That's the first thing that's going to come. I'm afraid of you because all of the negative that has been placed around police officers. And let's tear down some of those negative prejudices that have been put out there and labeled onto our police officers.
I want to ask you about disparities within the city of Peoria. Recently, there was an article that came out by Governing Magazine, a well-respected policy magazine out of D.C. Before that, it was 24/7, Wall Street, which also had a study in talking about Peoria being one of the worst places for African Americans to live. That over the course of a few years, people weren't as sold on that particular study, but then the governing one came out and kind of reinforced some things. What's your take on that, being a person who you say you've lived here pretty much all your life? The state of disparity, racial disparity amongst the city of Peoria, does it exist? Do we have a diversity issue, or is it more economics and those kind of things that really plague our city?
Well, I have to be honest. There is a problem. And that problem didn't just arrive overnight. This was something that has happened over the years. And unfortunately, due to the economics coming in, the community development, all these different, fair wages, just a whole lot of things have come about. Hiring, hired last, first to let go. Those types of issues have plagued the city for years, and we do need to face that. I'm a former wife of a husband who was last hired at Big Yellow and was first laid off at Big Yellow. That caused our family a lot of hardship. And I also was raised with Caterpillar. I had my mom, who was a retiree, and several other sisters and brothers. And over the years, with that type of disparity, as far as wages are concerned, that does cause confusion, strife, and all types of other insecurities within the family, especially the African American family, again, which is last hired, first fired, or laid off. So with that being said, the other issues that evolve around that, when we look at the crime issues, African American men, if there's no jobs out there, they're going to look for other ways to make money and revenue. And crime is probably the way, or they see the way of survival. And unfortunately, that's not true. But then it would cause a person families to have to uproot and move somewhere else. Most people who are here, especially African Americans, don't have that luxury to just pick up and leave. That would be more like a hardship, because leaving here with all of the securities that you've established over the years, such as the city, the people, the community, but to have to make that move and make the adjustment, I mean, some people want to do it. My mother did it, and I applaud her for it. But if I've known that today Peoria would be classified as, according to government, one of the most segregated cities in the U.S., and that's facts, Daniel. That's, Eugene, that's facts. And when you have factual evidence, then our city government, mayor on down, needs to take another look. Because I've heard different council people say, oh, they just gathered some numbers. They don't know, they don't live here. Well, evidently they live here, but they're not really looking at our issues face value.
Yeah, actually, the person who did the data management for that governing study did live here for a number of years and worked here. On that a little bit, there are a lot of people who say there are jobs within the area. We know that Caterpillar moved its headquarters, but they say that there are jobs, but a lot of times they can't find the qualified workers, which I've asked this question to other candidates as well. So in that case, is there a training issue? What can we do to get more people for education, for job training? If that is the argument that there are things out there, but they don't have the qualified workers, are there things that can be done to prepare people for those jobs that people say are out there?
Well, I don't mean to bash, but I have to go back. This is something that has happened strategically over the years. We have to look at our universities, and we're going to talk about one of the best universities in the country, and that's Bradley University. For a fact, Bradley didn't recruit within the city of Peoria. I grew up in that era. They recruited Chicago and other places and brought them in, gave them educations, and they went back to their communities. Meanwhile, we didn't get that education. Our generation went into skilled trades, electricity, plumbing, carpentry, painting. And now, if they couldn't get jobs through the labor union, a lot of them end up without a job, just basically with a high school diploma, and then the drug era came in during that same time. So it wiped out a lot of African American males. So our leadership, as far as higher education, didn't get there. So it's almost like it was this plan that came in and wiped the city out when it came to the African American family. But I do know for a fact that Bradley did not recruit. Coach McLean, I'll just use his name. Why didn't he ever become the coach at Bradley University? Why? He was perfect. He was the perfect man, especially when it came to leadership for African Americans. If Peoria wants to raise the bar for African Americans, put African American men more visible in this city, and let these young men see them in position to motivate them and encourage them to do better. But if they're not visible, If they're not, you're visible. Thank God for that. But if we don't see African American males in places where these young people need to see them, especially in our schools, that change is going to be tough to make.
Well, let's switch gears here to budget talk.
Okay.
As a city council person, that would be a huge part of your role to vote on the budget. And within this last year, the city was facing a multi-million-dollar budget deficit in which they had to make the decision of whether or not they were going to cut from police and fire for safety or raise fees. It's kind of a combination of both in this sense. Let's say you're on the council and that option comes up. How would you approach that? Do you vote to raise fees, or would you approve cutting to police and fire, or both? How would you approach that discussion? How would you reach your decision?
Let's look at the city structure as a whole, from the mayor, well, not so much the mayor because he's an elected official, but when you look at our city manager and our administrative staff, if our administrative staff is making $279,000 a year for a municipality that now is 112,000 people, we're not at 150 anymore. From what the studies show, that municipalities that have management levels that are overseeing a certain number of people within their municipality, they're to make a certain amount of money. They say, well, because of their education and because of their degrees, and we're not going to find anybody better unless they have that type of mega background. I understand that, but if we're not a city that can carry that level of payroll, then we have to make some real conscious decisions, or we need to do some heavy hitting and get out there and recruit some corporations to come in and be a part of this town to pay those taxes.
So you're saying you would make cuts to the higher level employees of the city. That's where you would start, as opposed to cutting from the lower end or from police and fire, those kind of things as well.
Right, to keep our city safe.
What are your thoughts tonight, actually? The city council, they're going to, or this week, I should rather, they have the conversation right now of looking at a possible additional fee for fire services, where if someone gets into a car accident within the city limits, it would be billed to their insurance if they're a city resident. If they're outside of the city, then it would be a straight bill to them. They're 100% responsible. They're saying that is to help recoup for the budget issues that they had. What's your take on that? Is that something that city council should move through, as they're probably going to be looking at this over the next couple of weeks? Is that something they should do? Should there be additional fees for, let's say, the fire department comes out for a motor accident?
Well, I always have a little conversation before I get to that point. I look at, if they would have done the budget a little different, they wouldn't probably have to incorporate these fees that are coming along. Meanwhile, as long as it's not affecting the residents of Peoria, because that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the city of Peoria and the citizens here. Now, if they're outside of the city limits and they accrue those fees, then that's on them and their insurance companies. But as long as they're city residents, I'm opposed to the fee.
But and there are those who say that city residents, I mean, even if it's going to be charged to your insurance, that's assuming you have the insurance in the first place, that who knows, maybe insurance premiums could raise as well. I mean, there's a lot of different conversations about that. But running out of time, so last question I have for you. Obviously, as an at-large council person, you'd be responsible for covering 1 through 5 as far as the districts. I've asked each candidate this question. Why do you believe you're the most qualified to represent all of the districts within the city limits?
Because I have lived in basically almost all of them. I've lived in the 61605. I was raised there. I lived in 61603. I lived in 61604. I've lived in 61614, 045. I've lived in all of the districts, and I have a healthy knowledge of how they operate, and I have friends in all of these districts as well. The one thing that I still believe in, because I was instrumental in implementing the Southside Pride neighborhood association, when I was spearheading that, I saw the importance of having neighborhood associations. So to bring them all together and to create because each one has different issues and value. And to bring all of that together, I really do believe that I would be the best candidate to be able to bring all of them together to build a united front.
All right. Well, Janice Lindsay, running for at-large seat with
Yes,
Peoria
sir.
City Council. Thank you so much for joining me today, and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, Eugene.
All right. Absolutely.